I love this job. You're gonna, oh, this is great. Just listen to this. A superhero who fights Islamic terror. Now, the great Frank Miller, a very famous guy, 300, Sin City, so many others, really resurrected the genre in many ways, has a new comic book called Holy Terror. It's dedicated, listen to this, to Theo Van Gogh, who was murdered by jihadist lunatics. And it pulls no punches, but it throws quite a few, actually, in displaying who the bad guys really are. It's great stuff. And Dr. Harley Sims is a specialist in heroic and medieval literature and has just written a wonderful article about all of this. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's great to be here.
Now, Frank Miller, he's sort of the #2 in comic books pretty much, isn't he?
Well, if you're referring to Alan Moore as #1, I'm not too sure about that. I think right now Frank Miller might be #1 because he's still working hard. He's still working on films. He's still working on one-shot graphic novels like this one. He is probably the greatest one we have right now. He started with Marvel as a penciler, I believe, working on Daredevil. And then in the mid-'80s, he did a comic arc called The Dark Knight Returns, where he reintroduced the world to this grim, like relentless, gritty figure, 50-plus-year-old Bruce Wayne, who is in a Cold War that continued into the new millennium. And the world has descended into anarchy and political extremism on both sides. And he's pretty much responsible for reinventing Batman from the campy 60s television series. And as you know, he went on to do 300. He did Sin City. And this is actually his latest project.
All right. Oh, holy comic book. I had to do it. But they're all, I mean, they're not really political. I mean, there are certain elements of it. But this one, I mean, just to give people an idea of what this is, this is quite, I mean, it's dedicated to Theo Van Gogh, who was a descendant of the great painter, a Dutch journalist, quite radical, quite anarchic. He was slaughtered in the street by a Muslim lunatic and various threats, stabbed through his, on a piece of paper, stabbed through his chest. The book quotes Muhammad or the Quran directly at the beginning about killing infidels. It is quite clearly a superhero battling not terror, but Islamic terrorism, isn't it?
Yes. Frank Miller was in New York, in Hell's Kitchen, on September 11th, 2001. And he was working on a new Batman title, The Dark Knight Strikes Again. And so he wasn't too far from where this happened. And what Holy Terror it represents is kind of a long, simmering response to those events. He didn't speak too much right away, but in 2006, rumors arose that he was working on a new Batman title where he said, Batman is going to kick Al-Qaeda's ass. And then in 2008, he announced that the character had drifted away from Batman. It was far too violent. And it became the Fixer. And a Fixer, nevertheless, is a clear analog of Batman. There's a cat burglar who looks like Catwoman. These are clearly the same characters under different names, and Batman has been around so long, he works as an archetype.
All right. I don't want to digress too much on Batman. Sure. I mean, Catwoman I can spend all day on, but anyway. But this one here, because he wrote this, and this is Hollywood and so on, and how did the great publishing and media establishment react to a book that says, superhero, the embodiment of all good things in American life, battling Muslim terror? How did they react to that?
People knew it was coming, and Frank Miller knew the response that it is now indeed getting. I mean, it was published yesterday. It is being lambasted. A fellow comic book writer said this is ridiculous. This back in 2006, mind you, when he found out Frank Miller was working on this. Frank Miller should just join the army. He shouldn't take his frustrations into the medium of comics. And if you just Google it, look at any article on it, people are saying this is a travesty. This is a piece of dreck. This is fodder for the anti-Islamic sect. This is absolutely awful. But the thing they're missing is that Frank Miller said this is a piece of wartime propaganda. He admitted it. And people are saying, well, you shouldn't bring, capes and spandex into a place where real lives are being lost. But I argued in the article that is extremely short-sighted. Captain America has his origins fighting Hitler. The X-Men refer routinely to the Holocaust. The Punisher broke up a pedophile ring. Probably the most influential graphic novel of all time, Watchmen, is steeped in politics, nuclear weapons, child abduction, murder.
X-Men has increasingly, in its movie version at least, become a tale of fighting homophobia. You don't have to be that deep to realise that, and some of the actors involved, they're pushing a certain agenda. But I can't imagine, if this was fighting Christian fundamentalism, I don't think there'd be too many people objecting. But, I mean, who's published him? Is it a mainstream publisher, or did he have to do some independent publishing?
No, actually, that's interesting because Legendary Pictures, who bankrolled 300, and they actually bankrolled The Hangover and The Dark Knight, so you know they're rolling in money. Yeah. This is their publishing division now. And Holy Terror is the first title to be released under that imprint. And so Frank Miller moved the project over to them, and he's deeply involved with them now. So, I mean, it's no longer associated with DC, like with characters or with the publishing itself. So it's an entirely independent release as far as the mainstream comic set goes.
Now, we spoke to some people today, and apparently, and this really shocked me because it's never ever happened before, but well, we're told that Muslims are offended. Who knew? I mean, this really is a shocker. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Well, Frank Miller said this is going to offend everyone. He said, I quote, "This is going to piss everybody off." You have to keep in mind, though, he did 300, the graphic novel, and then it was made into a film. And Mohammed Ahmadinejad himself was offended by the portrayal of the Persians in that film. I don't know what his venue was for saying that, but it got out there. And historians everywhere, intellectuals, this is an unrealistic portrayal of history. It's fascist. But I mean, it's criticizing the medium, the genre, for what it isn't. Frank Miller is very forthright with what he's producing. He's producing raw heroism, you know, ass-kicking, that sort of thing. Sure. So it's important to read it and appreciate it for what it is, and not try to twist it into something else.
Look, Ahmadinejad is being very disingenuous here. I'm sure the homoerotica of 300 was very arousing to him. I think we all know the truth about that particular individual. But wonderful book. I'm going to buy copies for everyone for Christmas. It'll fill every stocking of every friend I have. Thank you very much for your time. Wholly wonderful. Thank you.
I really appreciate it, Michael.